Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Sunday where it's almost 100 degrees outside here in San Diego. I hope everyone is well and safe and comfortable where you are. I just want to open up by reminding people who are new that we use headphones for a few reasons. Many of the frequencies on the soundtracks that we will hear are too low to reproduce through your cell phone or through your laptop speakers. Also, the headphones provide a 3D environment and brainwave entrainment data with different frequencies on each side that can synchronize the hemispheres. And the bigger idea here is to mind link everyone's brainwaves together into a single state with a soundtrack that I provide at the end. I also, this is the address for today's soundtrack, scientificsounds.com/alphabetology. I think that might be a word I made up. I don't know. I'll have to look it up in the dictionary. Alphabetology. In addition, this is the address to see all of the previous live streams if you're new or if you haven't seen them all. They're in a progression, and each live stream builds on information from previous live streams. So periodically I'll make reference to something I talked about before. I'll give a little brief explanation because I know there might be some people that are new, but this whole progression has unfolded for a very specific purpose. So it's best if you could go to this address and watch them in order, whichever ones you may not have seen. I will pop up that address for today's soundtrack at the end as well. That being said, the last time and the last few times we've been talking about the concept of language and language as a multifaceted thing. Last time we talked about NLP and how language extends far beyond just the words coming out of my mouth, that it's a full body electromagnetic field thing of communication. And today we're going one step before that, because the whole concept of when I talked about the kahuna prayer, where the kahunas said God grants all prayers, therefore our present experiences what we've prayed for in the past, and prayer happens before a thought, which means it happens before a word, which means it happens before language. And all of us experienced a period of time in our lives when we were a being who was alive before language acquisition. That's us in the womb, and that's us as a newborn baby. We eventually begin to acquire language by mimicking and by hearing and by trying to copy. When you think about it, the idea that each one of us learned how to speak, in this audience, learned how to speak English, or learned how to speak our native language just by picking it up, not going to school, not taking grammar lessons. We learned to talk by age 2 without going to school. Pretty impressive, mind-blowing, amazing thing that the body can do, that the brain can accomplish. And so when, essentially all of us went through our own personal Big Bang kind of idea. At one point, consciousness explodes in the void. We wake up and we're in the void. And then at some point between 16 and 24 weeks, all of the 5 senses come online in the brain. And we have our first sensory experiences. And in the womb, that's all sound and vibration, because you're in the dark and your nose and mouth are filled with fluid. So we're all initiated as water brothers and sisters, where sound amplifies through the fluids of the amniotic fluid by 5 times. When we look also at the, say, the prehistoric past, the history of our whole species could be looked upon kind of the same way, where we're in a primordial environment. We have no knowledge of science or planetary engineering or what the sun or the moon or the stars are. We find this environment chock full of all kinds of living things that are around us that we're deeply symbiotically connected with. And back in the prehistoric past, where our species was evolving and becoming upright and forming communities and tribes, realizing that a symbiosis relationship among people is a better survival outcome, where we band together and pool our resources. And in those days, sounds were primitive and primordial, but I suspect that those sounds were a variety of a language of their own without actually words. They were different types of sounds that would communicate a different thing. There might be a different sound that you make for a tree or for a grass or for yourself or for someone in your tribe, or there had to be a way of communication before language where it was just sounds that were made. And eventually those evolved where the sounds became more coherent, specific sounds to communicate different objects and different ideas and different things. Basically, different emotions became sounds for different objects, became much more complex as the brain evolved. There was also art and sounds, and I still believe humming and singing. These are forms of communications through paintings, and deeply put together with shamanic traditions of entering into other realms in a mystical state. But the concept of drawing pictures of the hunt and pictures of animals, and in some cases it's believed that painting these pictures of the animals gave some kind of energetic control over them and allowed the hunt to go better. But this idea of community as sounds evolved more and more and more into a coherent proto-language. As the brain began to develop specific centers, Brodmann's area, which is around in here, that's the speech cortex, began to evolve. And our vocal cords began to evolve in order to make more complex types of sounds and articulate much more complex types of sounds as language itself began to evolve. According to this, our bodies evolved for speech. The voice box dropped lower in the throat. The area above the vocal cords lengthened, enabling us to make a wide variety of much more complex sounds. And eventually, as language became much more articulate and much more evolved, then eventually these cave paintings became tools in themselves to link visual images with the sounds that we were making. And this was the first primitive beginnings of language in written form, which itself evolved in the cuneiform languages of the ancients, which evolved more and more and more into what we've got in the present day of our particular alphabet in English. but all these different kinds of alphabets that have arrived from and arisen and evolved out of various cultures, and the types of sounds that people make, and the symbols that represent those particular types of sounds, all began to gel as civilization advanced, until we have what we have in the present day, our English alphabet of 26 letters. And there's a hidden aspect to this that we always have to keep in mind. As I said before, when we were discussing the root of reality at a quantum level, and we were discussing Schrodinger's cat paradox and Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and E equals mc squared and all the rest of this subquantum reality, and relating it to the Vedas and ancient texts, where the from a quantum standpoint, reality as we know it, as appears to be solid, is not solid at all. It's an illusion. It's all vibration standing waves nested together that looks like something solid, a woven carpet of vibrational frequencies. And the idea that the next moment from now could be an infinite field of anything. And the reason the next moment is constantly a continuation of this moment is because that's what we all buy into. At a collective unconscious level, we're expecting the next moment to be a continuation of this one. So that's what the universe pops up for us. Closely tied with the shamans from Hawaii that I mentioned before, the kahunas, that God grants all prayers. And prayer happens before a thought. And before a thought is now. And now is before the next moment from now. And each new moment pops into existence full blown, including all of my memories and all of the articles I've got in my house behind me here. All of the things that prove to me that I'm 70 years old and that I live in this body and that this is what reality looks like is created moment by moment by moment. There really was no 70 years ago. All those photographs of me as a child are being created instantly right now to support my belief that I'm this old and I had a childhood in the past. So I popped that into existence. If you follow this idea, it means that whatever I expect the universe to be, that's what it will deliver to me. And if I was around 150,000 years ago as an ancient ancestor with a tribe who didn't know what the sun or the moon or the stars were, that these was magical forces of the universe that were bigger than me, gods, so to speak, something deeply mystical and magical. If everyone believed that that's what the universe was, that's what the universe popped into existence. It may be that before mathematics was developed, that the universe was not based on math, that the quantum field didn't exist until somebody, quote, discovered it, and then it popped into existence. And the further down that road you want to go, the more it unfolds and reveals new levels of complexity, because that's what you're expecting it to be. These are pretty radical ideas, but the idea that when we go back to studying the I Ching that we had discussed, that you could use the I Ching as a divination tool, an oracle, where you could throw these coins or the stocks and you come up with a hexagram, and certain lines of the hexagram might flip and create a new hexagram, so now you might have two hexagrams with some moving lines. And you read the hexagram and it always blows your mind. It always answers your questions so succinctly that it kind of, you can't wrap your mind around it. And sometimes it answers the deeper question that you know you should have been asking, but you couldn't quite get to it. And the answer reveals the question that was really behind the question you asked. Detractors, skeptics of the I Ching, when they read any kind of other hexagram at random there's a possibility that it could also look like it applies. And so therefore the argument is, well, I mean, the hexagrams are sufficiently vague that you could get any one and you could apply it to this and it would make it seem to work out. And the Confucius answer to that is, this hexagram is a distillation of the moment. Each new moment, everything that's in that moment is a distillation, a hyperdimensional puzzle piece that has to be there for this particular moment of reality to exist at all. Every single thing that's in this moment has to be here or this moment falls apart. So the hexagram is a distillation of this moment, and it's the only hexagram that you could have gotten because it's the hexagram you did get. Now, it might be argued that when we talked about the fact that the next moment from now, my expectation pops that moment into existence, but it could be that the next moment from now, every possibility in that infinite field pops into existence and creates an infinite number of corridors where the universe splits into an infinite number of avenues that play out every possibility that could be. And each one of those moments leads to a new moment with a new infinite number of corridors forever. Corridors becoming infinite corridors, each making a new infinite number of corridors, etc., as we march forward. So in each of those other corridors, you play out getting any of the 64 hexagrams and any combination of moving lines. Every possibility pops out into parallel corridors, but for this particular corridor, this is the hexagram you got, and therefore it's the only one that you could have got, and therefore it is a microcosm of the whole, distilled into a symbol. And that brings me to your name. Your name is the same thing. The name that you were given at birth is a distillation of the moment of you. That all of the energy fields and the energy patterns of you and the uniqueness of you and the unique talents and aspects that make you a unique thing in the universe has a vibrational frequency signature that we call a name. And remember that when I pronounce my name, Jeffrey Dean Thompson, I form these shaped wave packets that shoot out. And we saw a recording of me pronouncing my name on my recording studio software. If you remember that, you could see those wave packets. It's a very unique look. And that wave packet has power. Aside from the fact that when the wave packets hit my ear and I hear those words, those sounds that I translate into words in the Brodmann's speech area, and that those words have meaning in my memory banks. And so I have a meaning from those words, but aside from that, strip that away, we have wave packets of energy, pure energy moving through a medium of air molecules, impacting my body and channeling down my ear, but it's impacting my whole body, a wave front of energy in a shape and a tonality of the harmonics of my vocal cords. And that causes the pressure wave hitting the cells of my body causes them to distort in their shape. It compresses the cells on the surface, and that causes what's called the piezoelectric effect, which generates an electrical pulse from the torquing of the cell membrane. And that creates a wave of depolarization of these piezoelectric properties moving to the next cell, the next cell, the next cell. It creates a wave all the way through my body of electromagnetic energy that pushes through all my cells and communicates through the microtubular crystalline structure, internalized scaffolding skeleton that connects all my cells together. because sound travels through a solid 5 times better than it does through water. 70% water, 30% minerals, bone, internal scaffolding, skeleton, and so all of those also have piezoelectric properties. So we're moving electromagnetic, the electromagnetic counterpart of the sound waves that strike my body becomes electricity in my body and moves forward into the channels of least resistance of electrical flow. That's the meridians, the acupuncture meridians. That's also my blood, which is iron filings and hemoglobin. Iron in water exposed to oxygen rusts and makes it red, and that's why the blood is red. We have iron filings moving, circulating, and it's the only element in the periodic table that has magnetic properties. So magnets in motion create electricity, and so we have electricity generating from the motion of iron particles moving through our blood. And all of this is affected by a piezoelectric wave moving through my body from my voice packets coming out as I speak. And in particular, when I speak my name, it has special significance and importance to me because that name as an energy field shape was part of the frequency energy shape that is this body and is all the properties that make me unique, exhibited in this waveform that is my name at birth. No accident, all part chicken of the egg kind of a thing. And somebody could come along and say, well, I could have given you any kind of name, and that's not true, because this is the name you were given, so it's the only one that you could possibly have had, just like an I Ching hexagram. So the name is important, which brings us up to the idea that that the letters and the numbers have a mystical counterpart, and this goes back quite a long ways to our friend Pythagoras, which is way back at some of the very beginning live streams that I did talking about Pythagoras and what he came up with. One thing we didn't mention is that Pythagoras also came up with the concept of a deeper hidden meaning of the numbers, and the numbers as they could be applied to your name, a mathematical construction of the letters in your name that conform to a deeper interpretation, a mystical interpretation of your character and possibly even your future, which became the Pythagorean numerology system. There's a half a dozen different systems, and most of them have to do with different cultures and different languages. But we're centering ourselves on the English language for this particular crowd and for the people I'm talking to. And part of the reason for that also is English is what we're speaking, and that is born also out of the moment in a quantum field. We speak English because that's what's created in the moment to represent a distillation of quantum reality moment by moment in a string. So there's importance for why we have this particular alphabet and why the letters in this alphabet conform to an alignment with these different numbers. So you can see that A is the first number, so that's number 1. B is the second number, that's number 2. The third, the fourth, the fifth letter, the sixth letter. We get down here, we're at the 10th letter. 1 plus 0 equals 1. The 11th letter, 1 plus 1 equals 2. The 12th letter, 1 plus 2 equals 3. And that's how this goes. That's why these columns is the first letter and the 10th letter, etc., all reduced down to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can see that there's a letter missing here, but 9 is a special number, as we will see. And in each one of these numbers has a quality, sort of like the number equivalent of astrology, you might say. The first written document in history to talk about numerology is Numerorium Mysteria, printed in 1591. Actually, you could go online and you can look this up, and they have the entire book digitized for free. You can read this book if you can read Latin. And I actually went through that whole book looking at it, and it has a whole series of chapters, and one chapter is every single number taken with a long explanation. And back in the day, when I was in my esoteric studies and learning about all of some of the mystical things that I've talked about before, in my introduction to astrology and to numerology and to all of these other kind of esoteric sciences, I explored them in great detail. For some reason, numbers really took my imagination, and I went off on that and got deeply into it and became a professional reader, working out the numbers for people's names and their birth dates, and did it professionally for many years. The standard method is to take the vowels separately from the consonants. And so you add three things together. You add all the vowels together, you add the consonants together, then you add these two together for a total. So all of the numbers equivalents, 1, 5, 6, 6, 9, 5, 7, all added together equals 39. That's just for Jeffrey. And 3 plus 9 equals 12, and 1 plus 2 equals 3. So Jeffrey has a total value of 3, which is derived from 39. That represents my outer expression, who you see, the person presented to you in the outside world. Then when I add these vowels together, 5 plus 5, that equals 10. 1 plus 0 equals 1. So the vowels equal 1, derived from 10. And that is vowels stand for the emotions, and the consonants added together stand for the mental body, mental, emotional, physical. That's basically the mechanics of how modern numerology works. It gets much more complex. This is how I would usually do my chart. So I did my name. Here's Jeffrey with all the numbers that go with each one of these, and I've added the total, the vowels, and the consonants. You can see that 29 equals 11, and this is a double number. Double numbers have special significance. 11, 22, 33, they don't get reduced. The 2 stands in the background, but 11 stands on its own as a special thing. That's my middle name added to total, vowel, and consonant. And that's my last name with the 2 vowels and these numbers. Then I'm going to add all 3 totals together to get Jeffrey Dean Thompson equals a 3, 1, and a 2. Jeffrey Thompson without the middle name is this. Some people call me Jeff Thompson. That equals this. I worked out Jeff as a separate thing here. And that's all put together in relationship to your birth date, where you add 1 plus 2 plus 9 plus 1, 9, 4, and 7. You get 33. It's another one of those doubled master numbers. Here's the 11, 22, and 33. It's very difficult, if not impossible, to get a 44. But each of these, the 11 is higher intuition. This is a big mind with big ideas, but not necessarily ideas that become manifest. The 22 manifests them, called the master builder number. This kind of person has a knack for big ideas that can be made into reality. And a 33 is a spiritually evolved type because it combines 11 plus 22 together, so it's got all of their qualities, but it raises it all to a higher plane, selfless uplifting of humanity and severe devotion. I, at one point, let me just go back here. There's another way of doing. I used to do the long form, where you live through each letter of your name for the number of years that is ascribed to that letter in numbers. So E is number 5, so it's 5 years. J is 1, so it's 1 year. F is 6, and I have 2 F's in my name, so there's 12 years. 9 years for R, 5 years for E, 7 years for Y. And then the next name repeats, D-E-A-N, 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 and Thompson goes just one. So I only brought it up for this number of years, and then this is the year I was born, 1947, and so year by year by year, I can kind of go back and I can look at what kind of influences were involved at certain periods of time in my life. I'm adding this and this and this together to get 7, 1, 4, and 2, 5, 4, and 2, 5, 4, and 8. So that's where I'm getting these numbers, which gives me an overall influence of a number for that year, plus which letters were in that year. Hang on, I have a glitch with my screen, so let me get back up to speed here. All right. So I was part of this Gurdjieff group in upstate New York, and there was about 200, 250 people there, and we had a teacher who was running that school, that organization, who had been one of the nucleus students around Gurdjieff. And when Gurdjieff died, there was a power vacuum, and he didn't like the way it was going, and so he split off and formed his own thing. Willem Nyland, N-Y-L-A-N-D. And he would, there would be meetings. And sometimes he would have a meeting and he would give talks. He played piano, so sometimes he would give an emotional talk. And he had a grand piano that had been hauled up into the attic of a great big house of one of the people in this group. And 250 people would be up in that attic while he played this grand piano. And you would just sit there with your eyes closed and be following this music. And in one of those times, when I was there with my eyes closed, kind of meditating with this music thing going, I had this crazy out-of-the-body vision. I haven't told too many people this, but in this vision, I'm in a sacred ceremony. I'm in a place. There's a stage made of stone. We're like in a cave or something. There's a stone. The stage is lit. Off beyond, there was a large crowd, but you couldn't see them because it was in the dark. There were torches on the stage, and there was a dais with a giant, big old, huge book with blank pages. And there was a shaman or a priest or a monk in vestments standing in front of this big book, and there was 2 other kind of monks or priests standing on either side of this guy, and I'm behind looking. He's got a brush, dips the brush in ink, and he's chanting. And he's drawing on this book the letter A. And he's chanting the letter A. And the audience beyond in the dark is chanting along with him the letter A. That's how I know that it's a large space with a lot of people. because I can hear all these voices chanting the letter A. So he's A. It was a capital letter A. And I realized that this mystical ceremony is designing the alphabet, one letter at a time. And after he draws this letter A, underneath it, these words appear by themselves. They glow and then come into black letters that says strength, the ability to stand firmly alone. And I'm going, is that the meaning of that letter? What does that mean? And then there's somebody tugging on my pant leg, and I look down, and there's this little guy, looks like a leprechaun. He's dressed in a funny little costume, like a court jester, and he's like a midget or a dwarf or something, and he's tugging on my pant leg, and he's going, yeah, can't you see that the A is like two legs standing firmly apart, and just to make sure that you're extra strong, there's a pole that's been strapping those two legs together. So that's how come it gets extra strong. So let me go back to this. So when we look at the letter A here, we can see that we've got two legs with a brace that's bracing these legs together. So this is extremely powerful foundation of strength. And then it went on to sort of every letter it was doing this. How's that for a crazy experience? And in the following 2 weeks, more and more pieces of this would fall into my brain out of flipping nowhere. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night with some and I'd have to write it down. Sometimes in the middle of just doing something during the day, this big chunk would fall into my brain. I had to run for my paper and write it down. But the end result was a deep esoteric meaning for each letter of the alphabet and what that letter stood for, just as if it was a sign of the zodiac. 26 different archetypal personality types, distilled qualities. And it became obvious to me that, my numerology practice completely changed because I began to now interpret not so much the numbers, but which letters you have and where they're placed. Particularly the first letter of your first name, middle, and last name have extreme importance. Also, any numbers that are repeated throughout your name. For instance, my name has a whole number of E's and two F's right next to each other. First letter of my first name is J, that has special significance. T, special significance. D as my middle name also has significance. Those J, D, T forms a big part of who I am and what my personality is, and I can interpret. When I started looking at the alphabet, it became obvious that the primary male letter is I, and this is really an infinite line that goes forever. But for the sake of convenience, to be able to put it on a piece of paper, you've truncated and you've snipped a portion of that infinite line, and you've demarcated that it has been cut out of the whole with these lines here. This is the ultimate female number or letter. It's completely enclosed, and it's also an infinite line, but that line is this snake eating its own tail. So this is completely enclosed like the womb, and this is the phallic symbol of the male. And so you would expect that the letter I, if it was the first letter of your first name, would have those kind of characteristics, a very kind of male, stand up for yourself, individual, as opposed to O as the first letter of your first name, which would be a distinctly female, nurturing, rounded, mother-like kind of, and quiet, holding things without broadcasting it. And then everything else is derivative of that. The angular is male. The curved is female. So all the curved letters are female letters, and all the I at different angles and different places. This is just a series of I's. This is two I's. This is a female. That's a male. This is a female, where the total enclosure inside the O has a road that comes out. So there's a very specific avenue where this deep information that's usually held close to your chest has a specific road where it can come out and get communicated. N is, and Z is an N sideways or vice versa. W and M. E is a male letter. B is E with the female N's closing it off. Same thing with F and P. So it was that kind of way that became a whole new way of interpreting who you are, and keeping in mind the numbers behind that. So if we go back to this one, let me, here we go. So here we can say that your birth date is the primary essential, your essential nature. And your name is your socialization, the things that have happened to you. You acquire language, but you're born with the basic mechanisms. And so how this number relates to these numbers, the total, vowel, and consonants, shows you if you have direct access for your essential nature to shine out through your body or to be blocked. Now, 3, 6, and 9 have special meaning because they don't really have an opposite. 1 and 2 might have an opposite. So if I had a 1 here, but my name added up to 2, then there would be a conflict and not an easy way for this energy to shine out, because an opposite number in my name would be blocking that, and it would end up with conflicts, and it would show me where that blockage is, whether it's in my emotions or in the way my mind works or in how I express myself in the world. So for me, you can see that this doubling of a 3 has a direct way to come out through the total, my total expression with the name I'm born with. It even has a direct line out through Jeffrey Thompson, because 6 is what this distills to, and it has a way of coming directly out through Jeff Thompson. So I've been blessed with the ability that my name allowed a direct channel for my essence to come forward. But you can see that if there was a conflict there, it would immediately show what those conflicts are and how you might be able to deal with those. Here's a chart of kind of the standard, in a nutshell, meaning of each of the 9 numbers. You can just do a Google search on numerology and find dozens of these kind of sites that give you a general overall view. So it's kind of like the letters in your name is sort of like the NLP of numerology. I call it alphabetology. Studying the alphabet, studying which letters are in your name and where they're placed, and how many letters repeat themselves and where they are. how many vowels you have, how many consonants you have. At one point when I was doing numerology, the way my mind works, I'm going, okay, so the total is your external expression, your physical body, the vowels is your emotions, and the consonants is your mental part. But a little part of me goes, yeah, but who says so? I mean, how come? Why is that? Who's the person who decided that the vowels equaled your emotions and the consonants equal your mind? Where did that come from? Somebody had to dream it up first. What was the rationale? And so I thought, how could I find that out? What is a vowel anyway? And I realized, I didn't really know what a vowel was. So I broke out this book that I have. I'll show you. The Webster's New International Dictionary. This is quite a tome, this thing. And when you open it up, here's the letter A, this one right here. So if I pull that open, here's where it begins with the letter A. And it has actually a definition that is 2 columns long of the letter A. And all of these pages before the letter A even begins, we've got this many pages here. And those pages is 600 pages of the entire history of English, from its Phoenician and Sumatran and roots, prehistoric roots of the English language, and how it expressed and came through, and it's pretty mind-blowing. And in that 600-page, and I read that, by the way, and now you know how truly strange I really am, because I read 600-page history of the English language in a dictionary. And then I went through and read the meaning of each letter. Letter A, letter B, letter C, which has 2 or 3 huge columns of the whole history of that letter, all the different references of that letter in mathematics and in psychology and in this and that. And when you read the meaning of each letter, you could just use that. Because if the letter was a personality, these definitions in just the dictionary tell you what that personality would be like. It's pretty amazing. So in that 600-page introduction was the meaning of a vowel. A vowel, A, E, I, O, and U, and sometimes Y. The vowels are all the letters of the alphabet where the tongue and the teeth and the lips do not touch. The mouth is open and nothing touches. All that's happening is changing the shape of my mouth. So the breath comes directly out with the least amount of impediments in its way. A, E, I, O, U. Nothing touches. The consonants, on the other hand, are the specific attenuation of the breath coming out with the tongue or the teeth or the lips. And all of the letters of the alphabet are divided by what happens with the mouth. For instance, labials are when my lips touch, like M. Palatals are when my tongue touches the roof of my mouth in some place, like T, or S, or N. So if you pronounce N for yourself right now, you can see and observe what happens in your mouth that you kind of do automatically without even thinking about it. N is the tip of your tongue touches the roof of your mouth on the top just behind your top front teeth. S is a really weird one, because when you pronounce S, the tongue forms this fold, and the outer edges touch the roof of your mouth and creates this hollow tube space for this sound to happen. All of this has been acquired somehow organically, automatically as a child, and we use it without thinking about it. So a great present awareness meditation, in the true meaning of the word of mindfulness, is pronounce each letter of the alphabet and see what happens with your mouth. So it's palatals, dentals is when I actually touch my teeth with my tongue. Gutturals is a hello, that's a guttural. Certain letters are masquerading letters. Certain consonants, like H. When I pronounce H, my tongue does the thing against the roof of the mouth and curls. But in the pronunciation of the letter H in a word, H is never pronounced as a consonant. It's always pronounced as a vowel. So it's a mental type of person masquerading as an emotional type of person. Henry, Helen, Herbert. It's and nothing touches. So it's pronounced as a vowel, a guttural vowel, an unspoken vowel, a vowel that actually doesn't exist except pronouncing a word, because when I pronounce H, it's a consonant. But when I pronounce it as a word, it's a Helen, hello. It's pronounced as a vowel. That tells a lot about a person who has H prominently in their name, what kind of a person they are. So the upshot of this is that when I do a meditation on pronouncing my name, Jeffrey Dean Thompson, do that. Meditate on pronouncing your name and see what thing happens with your mouth with each word. Jeffrey Dean Thompson, something happens. And you repeat that over and over and over again, and after a while your name, the meaning of your name disappears, and you can really center on this movement of shaping wave packages, which is the wave package representation of your essential nature, clothed in your name. And it's this aspect of alphabetology, where the alphabet is a pronunciation of shapes, and there's 26 shapes that we use in our alphabet. And then we string those shapes together to make a new complex shape made of smaller component shapes from the alphabet. That is one step before language again, and back to the prehistoric roots of where language originated, which was a series of sounds. I would make a certain type of sound when I pointed to a tree, and pretty soon everybody agrees that whenever we make that sound, we're referring to a tree. And that's where the raw beginnings became. We're going to travel back to that prehistoric time that we talked about before, where the soundtrack was in a prehistoric canyon. We're way down on the bottom of this canyon. There's a river, and we're following this river, and there's all of these creatures that we're in a symbiotic relationship with. We're following that river to its source all the way back, where we're looking for the spirit of Gaia, the spirit of Mother Nature herself, in order to ask her, how do we regain our connection? How do I regain my personal connection with the reality of my life and the reality of the planet and the reality of other living beings, cut through the cement that's paving over the parking lot of raw nature underneath, which is who I think I am, on top of my own nature, and meet with this Mother Nature force that is a thing that's primal, that is everywhere around us, but we don't see it. It's the trees on the side of the road, it's the lawn, it's the field behind your house, where all kinds of living creatures live out their whole lives, and we don't notice. And there are our essential brothers and sisters, as are the trees, as are the plants, as are everything that's alive. So to commune with that once again, to reach a place in ourselves where we can meld with that again, meet that again, and be part of it again, like the prodigal son's return, is what this particular soundtrack is all about. And this soundtrack is once again using iota 2. This is the deepest, slowest brainwave entrainment pulse that I have created and that I've experimented with. And this is the one pulse every 2 minutes, and that's right down there with the brain entrainment synchronicity with the respiratory cycle of trees and plants and green growing things, Earth itself. So that's why I want to use this entrainment and this soundtrack to bring us to one step deeper after we were in the canyon meeting with Gaia, that she revealed herself to us and we became part of it. And that's what this soundtrack is a vision of, becoming melded and melting into the living forces of Earth itself, where we become one with roots and twigs and leaves and magic mushroom circles and moss, fireflies in the evening with the full moon, breathing with the green growing things, the moist smell of the earth. That's where we're going this time. And where we will, meet where we'll meet the face of Gaia, the face of Mother Earth herself, who is us. We're not visitors here. We're grown out of this planet, out of this universe. We belong here. We've just walked off on some path on our own and got separated. And the rest of life goes on all around us. We are the ones who've separated ourselves out and think that it's something on the side of the road. And in reality, the road is cut through nature. Nature's not on the side of the road. My personality, who I think I am, is my road, cut through my nature. And when I relinquish that and let it go and get deeper into myself and reconnect with the primal forces of life that I share with all life forms all around me, that is the face of Gaia, and that is my face. And that's where we want to go at this point. So for everybody, let's put headphones on. This is one of the more unique soundtracks I've done, so be prepared for a pace of the musical field that is something you're not used to. This is deep and mystical, and it's earth and growing things, and it's the respiration breathing rate of plants and green and roots and things like that. Here's where you can get that soundtrack, free download. We also get a discount on the album that it came from. The album was called Isle of Skye, the very first one I ever produced in 1986. And there's an interesting story to tell about that, which I will tell next time, about that album, where it came from and the sounds that came out of that. Also, to see all live streams, this is the address for that. Until next Sunday, please take care of yourselves. Peace and love and health and happiness to everyone. Please take care of yourselves, and I will see you next Sunday.